everyone, and welcome to Intel on AI. I'm Ryan Carson from Intel, and I'm your host. I'm so excited today to welcome David Ellison to the show. He's the Chief Data Scientist for Infrastructure Solutions Group at Lenovo. Through Lenovo's US and European AI Discover Centers, he leads a team that uses cutting-edge AI techniques to deliver solutions to external customers while internally supporting the overall AI strategy for the worldwide Infrastructure Solutions Group. Before joining Lenovo, he ran an international scientific analysis and equipment company and worked as a data scientist for the U.S. Postal Service. Before that, he received a PhD in biomedical engineering from Johns Hopkins. He has numerous publications in top-tier journals, including 2 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Welcome to the show, David. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm happy to be here.
Good to have you here. So let's get started and talk about rubber meets the road. How are you actually implementing AI at Lenovo?
Okay, well, this has a little bit of backstory to it since, before I made some changes, I was making all the decisions about AI and responsible AI as the chief data scientist, and figured that was problematic for many reasons. So what we did is we established the Responsible AI Committee. And this is a group of about 20 to 30 people that get together and make all the decisions for internal projects and external projects about what is fair, what is just. And we established 6 principles that we're going to go through in this podcast, I'm sure. 6 principles that we cover, and we make sure that we are protecting privacy and security, diversity, inclusion, accountability, environmental and social impact, and all these different principles, we ensure it. And this is a diverse group of people,
right?
And not just a bunch of data scientists making decisions.
There's nothing wrong with data scientists, but it's good that you've got a representative group. So let's go on to talking a little bit about AI systems prioritizing privacy. So how can we ensure that AI systems do prioritize privacy and security, especially when dealing with sensitive personal data? I think everyone's tuned into the fact that we need to think a lot about this right now.
There's a number of principles here. The first one is data minimization. There's this tendency in AI to just collect as much data as you can, right, and figure out how to use it later. And that's not a good way of going about it. That's just collecting a lot of personal information that you may or may not use. So if you do have to collect personalized data, anonymization and pseudonymization is also important. You want to hide the data that has personal information in it. Anonymize it. There's many techniques for that.
What's one practical way that's actually being done?
So the practical way that's being done is there's certain programs out there, certain open source programs that actually do it. Differential privacy is a mechanism for doing this too. It's actually used by the Census Bureau. If you ever need to get census data, it's used. That is like introducing a little bit of noise into the data that helps protect privacy.
Got it. Awesome. So transparency is obviously a big subject here, right? Folks want to understand how things work. How is AI making decisions? So what role does transparency play in building trust between AI systems and their users? And can you provide examples of how transparency can be achieved in AI decision-making processes?
Sure. Transparency, you want to know that you're interacting with an AI system and what data is being used to interact with. So, model documentation is basic on this one. Now, I'm not saying that everyone reads the model documentation, but at least having it written out there is important.
Yep.
Having user-friendly interfaces that tell you you're interacting with an AI system, it'll get more and more frustrating to be interacting with systems that you think are human, person that you're interacting with, and you're just talking to a bot.
Right.
So we want to avoid that.
So I assume that we're going to quickly move into a world where most of the systems you interact with will be driven by AI, whether it's machine learning or deep learning. So how do you think practically that's going to roll out in the future?
I think we're going to be just like the acceptance of cookies became a big thing on the web, right? Where you have to accept cookies. You're going to have to accept the fact that you're dealing with, a chat bot, and you have to be informed on it. And, this is important, especially in European law. America hasn't taken this to the forefront as much, but in European law, it's very important to represent that you are interacting with a automated system.
Right. So to me, it feels like we'll have this choice in the future of where we can have much better results, much better interactions, more valuable responses as we give more and more of our data to an AI system. But we'd want to understand, how much we're doing that, almost like a dial, and some transparency of, okay, how much of my data does this system have? Are we already doing this, or is this something you think that a lot of companies are going to have to figure out?
I think a lot of companies have to figure this out. I think, we are just, we have all these new chatbots, ChatGPT burst onto the scene. We are just seeing, these really advanced chatbots come out. And I think we need to learn how to use them and regulate how we use them. I mean, we have to come to a consensus as a community of what is fair and what is the right way to be using these things versus just allowing every company to decide whatever it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all using ChatGPT now. It's got this feature of memories, as we all know. And it's fascinating to see the user experience when it says memory updated, right? And you start to get this sense of, oh, okay, it's starting to remember pieces of me. Then you can go and delete certain memories. So I wonder if we'll start seeing that user experience paradigm, rolled out further, or is it going to be even more complex than that? Do you think we'll see something like that, or will it be a different user experience?
I think we're going to see something like that. There is in European law a right to be forgotten, and that, where you're able to, this gets back into the privacy and security concerns that we started talking about. You have a right to know what data is being used and control what data is being used in your automated system.
Absolutely. So it kind of leads to the next question, which is about explainability. So how do we balance the need for explainability in AI decision making with the complexity of modern data sets?
I mean, there's the two things: complexity of the modern data set and the complexity of the models. There's this trade-off. Do you want more complex models or do you have more interpretive models? Right. If you're using linear regression and decision trees, you can figure out what's going on pretty easily. But when we start using neural networks, it becomes much, much harder.
Right.
That depends on the use case. If you're doing like ad targeting, maybe you don't care that, show me cat videos, maybe you don't care that you are explained exactly why that decision was arrived at. But on the other hand, if there's a medical diagnosis of, hey, we think you have cancer, you really want to know why it thinks you have cancer.
Right. That becomes extremely important very fast. So we've seen some of the labs release this idea of feature control, where you can start to understand which features are being activated in the deep learning neural network. Do you think that's leading us somewhere helpful, or how do you see us actually implementing explainability in neural networks in the future?
A shout out to where we're here local to the Raleigh area, and we have a professor here, Cynthia Rudin, that has produced some interesting work in this area. And one of her papers, This Looks Like That, takes AI models, and like you get a picture of a bird, it says, well, this wing looks like this bird, so we think that this is this bird because this wing and this beak look this way.
Right.
So it's a very detailed explainability paradigm, and I think we're going to see more and more of those developed.
Got it.
It just takes a little bit of time for the catch up, because right now we're just making bigger and bigger models. It's going to be more and more important for us to make explainable models.
Right.
Too.
Like you said, if you go to the doctor and you get MRI and it gives you a scary result, you want to understand, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that. Especially, I assume we all know now that a lot of the scanning, explaining, diagnosing is going to be happening, through models in the future. And they'll be more accurate, but we also understand why, because there's not a human talking to us on the other end. So Let's keep moving on to talking about diversity and inclusion. So what are some of the strategies for promoting diversity and inclusion in AI development to ensure that these systems better reflect the needs of a massively diverse user group?
Sure. First is assessing the current state of your team. I mean, having a diverse team helps you build diverse products. So, making sure you analyze your team's demographics, background, and skill sets, see where you understand. And if you do have deficiencies in that area, recruitment and onboarding and development can play a whole role. And then when you do have a system that is working, doing involved in diverse perspectives and user experience testing. I mean, you have people with all different technology backgrounds and different backgrounds that have to use the technology.
Right.
And, it's frankly unfair to have it just after one demographic and it works for just a small percentage of the people out there. You need to work for everybody.
Absolutely. One of the things that we did at a previous ed tech company that I ran is that we created apprenticeships where we'd actually go and we would source talent from groups that didn't look like us and train them up. And I can see a lot more companies doing that in the future, specifically with AI, machine learning. There's a lot of opportunity there. It's really good to hear that Lenovo, Intel, and others are thinking actively about this and how important this is. So. All right, moving on to the next question. How can data scientists effectively mitigate potential environmental and social impacts associated with AI system deployment?
Sure. There's lots of things you can do. Sustainable models, right now there's a race to make the biggest model possible. Some of these models use as much energy as the city of New York City in a day, or just train. It's crazy how much energy these things are using. So using domain-specific AI models over constantly increasing foundation models really increases the energy, decreases the energy utilization. So you can get a much more optimized output. You can also do these technical things like energy efficient algorithms, model compression, sparse computation, and all these technical things that allow you to use energy more effectively. And, depending on how much energy costs, if you're in Germany versus Texas,
right.
That matters quite a bit to the overall bill that comes when you start dealing with AI.
Absolutely.
And then you also have the social side of things, and I think that involves involving all your stakeholders, using getting feedback from your stakeholders, getting them reviewing the process and how AI is affecting everybody in the company and outside the company.
Absolutely. It's been interesting to see really the excitement around small language models and how we've actually started to see how you can have a really effective, model running on the edge, maybe with 2 billion parameters that actually is doing a very good job at a specific task. So it's exciting to see that we've got innovation on that edge. And obviously, that's one of the reasons we're excited about partnering with Lenovo. We've got a lot of compute now on the edge that can run these SLMs very effectively. Do you, and then we have on the other side, we've got Llama just dropping, 400 billion. So we've got these massive models dropping. How do you see the future of very large models being run in the cloud versus small language models running on the edge, and how's that going to shake out in your opinion?
I think it's all about using the right tool for the job. And if you have a highly complex, PhD level response that you need, maybe you have to go with the largest models out there. But if you are just looking for a chatbot to do customer service engagements, something running closer to the edge that's quicker, more responsive, lighter, and again can be run at the edge, is more your model. I mean, let's not over-engineer every solution. I think there's a place for the small language models and the large language models together. We just have to figure out what that balance is.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're just walking down the street, you probably don't need to drive a Ferrari, right? So,
right.
It's exciting to see these things be innovated, and actually the improvement in accuracy that we are seeing, like you said, through the actual architecture innovation. Next question I have is around accountability. What measures can be taken to ensure accountability and reliability in AI decision-making processes, particularly when dealing with high stakes or mission critical apps?
Absolutely. This is important. Somebody has to be responsible for when AI goes awry. And if there's not accountability for that, it's everybody pointing to, well, maybe a developer did something wrong somewhere. And no, there's no accountability and there's no method for redress if something goes wrong. So, transparency in the development process, documentation, explainability is important, robust testing and validation. And then accountability mechanisms, establishing clear accountability structures of who has the right roles and responsibilities for the system development, and somebody is responsible, and there's some human oversight if a decision is being made. So if your loan gets denied, there's some human oversight. It's not just an automated process making these decisions. There has to be some human oversight of that so that there's some responsibility involved.
Absolutely. So as we see AI systems be rolled out across probably every company in the world, for folks that are listening to the show that are in an executive role, who should they be thinking about putting in charge of that accountability? Is that the CTO, or is this a new, chief AI officer? What do you think is going to be standard practice for making sure that these systems are accountable and explainable?
I wish I knew standard practices in AI. AI in general is non-standard practices. I do encourage the development of the new chief AI officer role. I think that's important to have kind of this holistic executive level presence to make these decisions. When you deal with the CIO and the CTO, they may not have that holistic view of how AI interacts in a responsible manner and in a manner to protect their clients. So I think having somebody where the buck stops here is important.
Yeah, it also feels like it kind of bleeds into the CISO territory as well. It's going to be fascinating to see how this shakes out. And then, of course, give us 5-10 years, AI is going to be just assumed, and we don't have chief cloud officers. So it'll be kind of fascinating to see how that role then gets reintegrated back into, the standard exec C-suite. So
well, when AI is successful, it's no longer AI, right? AI used to be Google Maps. Google Maps used to be AI. Now it's just an app on your phone.
Yeah.
So like when AI is successful, it doesn't seem like AI, but it's still there.
Yep, absolutely. So a couple fun questions to close out the show. What kind of books or podcasts or content are you absorbing a lot of about AI that's interesting to you?
So I subscribe to every newsletter out there.
Do you have infinite time? How do you do that?
So I must say I don't read everyone. I read a selected amount, but I subscribe to, and I posted on my LinkedIn the interesting stories about there, but what's happening in AI. I allow other people to do that search for me. Also, there's a service out there, Perplexity, that searches the web. That's really great at searching the web for topics. Yep. So if you want an update on a particular topic, Perplexity is a great place too.
Yeah, Perplexity is great. The simple user experience of kind of multi-step reasoning and then documenting the sources, it just gives you that feeling that you want. I totally agree. I'm a big Perplexity user. I'm also enjoying the new artifacts on Claude 3.5 Sonnet as well. So it's fun to see all that moving forward. Okay, so any particular podcasts that you really enjoy in the AI space, or even non-AI related?
I like a lot of podcasts. Let me check my podcast here. I got we have Data Skeptic. Data Skeptic and Data Framed are ones that I definitely listen to.
Nice.
Gradient Descent and The Gradient are probably other ones that I listen to, along with everything else, all the other podcasts out there.
There's so many. One that I particularly enjoy is called Latent Space. And the founders of that came up with this idea of the AI engineer, and there's been a lot of work around that. So it's kind of fascinating to see how it all shakes out. So, well, David, I've really enjoyed this chat, and I appreciate you bringing all of your expertise and your years of knowledge to the show to share. What's the best place for people to go to find out a little bit more about you and what Lenovo is also doing in AI?
So you can reach out to either AI Discover at Lenovo.com. That'll lead to the center that I'm in charge of, or you can reach out to me directly at D Ellison. That's DELLISON at Lenovo.com. Happy to answer your questions. Happy to, help you figure out how AI can help you in your journey.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere on the internet. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Visit intel.com/AI to learn more.